Hello, I'm David Bryant. Welcome to Chapter 3 of The Hour Has Come as we continue with the second part of our two-part analysis of the state of the soul of our union. You know, there's no doubt our nation is under a major stress test right now. Many Americans report losing any ability to grasp what our nation's overall purpose is ultimately all about, let alone where it's headed. A disequilibrium of vision for our future is robbing many of us of a sense of our corporate selfhood. In addition, research reveals that in our season of discontent and upheaval, more than half of our citizenry express a diminishing sense of personal peace, coupled with a growing and palpable fear about what all these ominous cultural trends will ultimately do to us. Almost without exception, therefore, most Americans find themselves engaged directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, in one form or another, in the battle for the survival of the soul of America. And it's being waged daily on cable TV, online, in our schools, on Capitol Hill, at the office, through a myriad of podcasts, and even inside many Christian congregations. You know, for most of us, however, this battle resides ultimately in the palm of our hands. As we scroll every day endlessly through posts and texts and video clips, and then we get angry, and then we respond back. You know, far too often, the rancor that I'm talking about seeps in close to home, sometimes building walls between family members, and other times it spills over into overt political violence, resulting in attempted and even deadly assassinations of the persons considered to be the enemy. You know, I was moved by an analysis that appeared on CNN immediately after the recent assassination of a widely followed political activist. Let me give you what it said. It said this: "This marks the latest example of violence tearing American politics across our century and the ideological spectrum. While history tends to highlight presidential assassinations, more recently, state and local public servants have upended the tenor and the terms of democratic debate in a country with more guns than people. What we're witnessing right now is not the product of a single group or ideology, but perhaps evidence of now this is CNN speaking, of a growing, widespread civil unrest." Okay, that's one witness to the ugly underbelly of the chaos America finds itself caught up in today. But how did we arrive at this point anyway? What can we ever do to now renew the state of the soul of our union? A central thesis of this entire series, as you know, is that our national disquiet has everything to do with the moral and spiritual conditions of America's soul. And therefore, for Christians, the situation requires our full attention. It's the issue we need to tackle most of all, simply as being good American citizens. But in the end, the solution we finally offer to our country, it must be moral and spiritual in nature. And how can 220 million Americans who claim that their Savior is the world's Redeemer, how can we then pursue any higher priority than that? Let me tell you a story. On May 20th, 2025, the global church celebrated the 1700th anniversary of the opening of the first Christian ecumenical council held in Nicaea, Asia Minor, which is modern Turkey, and it took place in AD 325. Now, that ancient convocation was convened by, get this, the Emperor Constantine as the recently converted leader of the Roman Empire. he had a twofold objective for that gathering. One, to solidify his domain by uniting the disparate Christian communities across the empire and bringing them together around a shared vision of the glory of Christ. And number two, he wanted to provide a unifying foundational document for the church on which he could rebuild and steady the 4th century Roman Empire. Let that sink in. Here's what happened. The predominant political leader of that day, presiding over every one of history's greatest global empires, having just recently encountered and surrendered to Jesus Christ, realized that the only solution to resolving the factions and upheavals that were rocking his realm had to be spiritual in nature. In other words, Constantine concluded that rallying all of his subjects around a universal, that's what the word ecumenical means, around a universal, vibrant, Christocentric vision that could revitalize and unite the church, and in turn would provide the glue to hold the entire empire together, to help Christians and non-Christians live together in a new measure of harmony. The strategic deliberations of that convocation in that long ago generation, it resulted in what's known today as the Nicene Creed, which today is recited by over 1 billion Christians worldwide every single Sunday. Now, to be sure, historians are correct to raise a host of concerns about many other aspects of the reign of Constantine, and I share that with them. Still, let me ask you, is it possible that the vision found in this 4th century confession, the Nicene Creed, that's what could hold value for 21st century America? Not the Roman Empire, the American Empire. With its intentional, that is the creed, its intentional elevation of the nature, greatness, and glory of our Redeemer, could its focus highlight a way forward for the church in America? And then subsequently, for the beginning of the healing of America's soul as a whole? Does its magnifying of the wonder of God's Son hold the secret to how Christians might help rebuild, restore, renew, and even thoroughly revolutionize the American experiment? I'm asking, in other words, is the key to a moral and spiritual revolution in America the same as Constantine perceived for his domain 1,700 years ago? Do we, like the church back then, do we need to reclaim for the church in America today a more dynamic, more comprehensive, more compelling view of Jesus' supremacy and all-sufficiency in order to motivate Christians across the country to rise up together, to work together, to manifest more of the fullness of Christ's transforming love, his reconciling ministry, and sharing his gospel of hope? What do you think? Would this provide enough moral and spiritual input to revolutionize for the future blessing of all the peoples of our land? A blessing that includes millions who even remain non-Christians in the end? Is this possible today? Has the hour for this come? Absolutely. We're going to discover all about that in many of the upcoming episodes. But there's even more next time. I'll see you then.